Well, if you take a good look at that guava post out there, the post was built so I could cover my blueberries, but I did not cure the guava when I cut it. So I pushed it in the ground, and currently we are getting a free strawberry guava shrub, which here is a big weed and I don't want it. But you get the idea here, how when you push a piece of wood in the ground for one reason, when it starts growing, often others will imagine that you have some sort of magical powers with plants. This is how the green thumb thing first got stuck on me. When I was a young man and had planted a garden, and without realizing it, I cut willow branches to use for marker stakes. Every darn one of them took root, sent up tops, started growing at the ends of my rows. A friend came by later in the summer, looked down, pulled down the stake, and said, "Oh my God, Bill, you have a green thumb. Your stakes are growing."
Greetings, fellow gardeners. You may notice that today I have taken off the bright Hawaiian shirts and I'm wearing my strap overalls. You know what that means. No lava videos today. No talks about life and all this. Today we're talking about gardening. But I'm going to talk about a little bit of philosophy in gardening today and some of the mysteries that we face. So, today my subject is green thumb gardener versus brown thumb gardener. I hear this a lot. People come to me and they say, "Bill, you have a green thumb though. You can do that, Bill, because you have a green thumb." Well, I don't know. Looks kind of pinkish to me, you know. So I've never really believed any of that. All right. I believe, from my point of view, that if I am a special gardener, it's only because I kind of tend to stay out of the plant's way, give it whatever I figure it probably needs, and let it do its thing. So, basic bottom line on a green thumb gardener. A green thumb gardener believes that plants know exactly what they're doing. It's only people that mess up plants, by and large. I mean, the bugs can get them, lava can run them, there's a lot of things that can happen. But when you're out there in your garden, most of the time, if something goes wrong and the plant doesn't perform, really the last thing you want to do is blame the poor plant for what happened. It's generally the gardener's fault, because the gardener overlooks something. They forgot the nutrients in the soil. They forgot to control insects or slugs or something, and the plant got eaten. You know, you may have planted it and you like the furry little bunnies jumping around your yard, but they ate everything. So, you know, the gardener wasn't quite prepared for doing the work right. And so the brown thumb gardeners are the ones where things tend to go wrong for them. And I've observed this for many, many years now. People had, like I said, had come to me and told me, "Well, you're a green thumb." But then while working in the nursery business, I would often have people approach me and they're looking at a plant, but the first thing they'll say is, "Well, you know, I'm a black thumb or a brown thumb gardener. Everything I plant dies." Well, my best suggestion on that one, usually, even though it seldom would come out of my lips, is don't kill the plants, leave them alone. Go buy a rock, invest in a coffee table, you know, get a magazine subscription or go to the gym. Don't punish the plant kingdom. But, you know, everybody wants to try. Flowers are beautiful, tomatoes taste great, and so on. So yeah, I try to give them a hand. And the observation rule I found from observing the people who were brown thumbs. The brown thumbs would bring me all this damaged stuff. I mean, oh, poor plants. I learned more about what not to do in the garden and the landscape and the farm by having people bring it to me than I ever learned on my own. Because generally kind of did things right most of the time, so I didn't have too many failures. But man, oh man, the stuff come to me, you know, rose bushes that have been sprayed with Roundup because they wanted to get rid of the weeds. Can't do that. Green bark plant, anything with chlorophyll in the stem cannot have an herbicide used around it, and so on, you know. I once had a woman who came to me, and the peach tree I'd sold her had died. She pulled it out of the ground. She brought it back. She wanted her money back. Says, peach tree's no good. I said, geez, something's odd here about all of this. Tell me more. Well, it turned out she had aphids in the peach tree. Well, that's kind of normal, you know. Us green thumb gardeners know you plant a tree, you might experience aphids or something on that order. And so, you know, you figure out how to deal with it. You deal with it. Well, this lady, she saw the aphids. She immediately panicked, ran into the house, got herself a can of insecticide that was designed only for use on concrete, wood, and other surfaces, not for living plants. It was clearly labeled for that. And she went and she sprayed that thing with it until it was soaked down, you know, and killed the tree. Literally, the insecticide wasn't suitable for the tree. I had another similar incident, again, with trees and insects, where the lady had taken malathion, it's a nasty organophosphate insecticide, it's still around, and instead of diluting it to the label, had sprayed the stuff full strength on the tree. Well, it went so far as that it actually killed the bark. It seemed to burn the leaves off. I mean, it soaked right into the cambium and killed the whole darn tree. Well, I kind of figured it out at that point. I looked at that and I said, you know, the only difference between the green thumb and the black thumb people is the green thumb gardeners are 80% observation and analysis, but only 20% action if any action is to be taken at all. The brown thumb gardener is 20% observation and analysis, but 80% action. They see a problem, they want to do something about it, they will immediately jump to some conclusion or some information the neighbor gave them or some yo-yo at a local box store, nursery or something, you know, and they get this bad advice or just reacting on their own, and they will do things then that really are dangerous to the plants. They're oftentimes not at all even directed at the problem that's at hand. You know, one of the examples again of things that I've seen is people who are brown thumb gardeners will come by and they will look at their plant, and the plant doesn't look well. So the first thing they can think of, and that is very common, fertilize it. Well, if the plant was getting dry, no water underneath it, and that was why the poor thing was dying, and you dump fertilizer all over it, and then maybe turn a hose on it or not, depends. That's a death sentence, because the poor thing, when the water does come, will suck that stuff up so hard because it's thirsty. It's really, really thirsty. And it's like, you know, giving a man who hasn't had a drink in a week something liquid, and I mean, oftentimes you can watch him pour gasoline or vodka down his throat just because it's wet, and that's what the plant does. It just will absorb it, and then the minerals kill the thing. So it's the 80-20 rule is actually the green thumb, brown thumb gardener rule. Now the 80-20 rule applies in many other situations in life. I use it frequently. You know, when we go out into the garden, first thing we want to do is figure out what is the culture of the plant we're looking at. Many plants are what I refer to as generalists. They will take average conditions, typical composts and fertilizers, you know, average water and so on. There's nothing specific about them at all. I'd say that most of the plants, 80% of the plants, fall into that group of generalist plants where typical conditions are going to work okay for them. But you got another portion of the plant kingdom that has rather specific characteristics, and they really can't be ignored. You need to know them. For instance, you have shade-loving plants. Well, you put a shade-loving plant in the sun, and, it's not going to do well. And, in fact, you can put a shade-loving plant in the sun, but usually only where it faces the morning sun, because it's cool in the morning. If you turn the whole equation around, and instead of giving it 2 hours of morning light, you give it 2 hours of afternoon light against the western wall of the house, well, there the poor thing will fry. And so that's a subtle difference. This, west side, east side, same kind of light, but it's hot in the afternoon. And up against the wall like that, it might rise to 100 degrees and just burn that poor thing up. So, there's these little subtle things you need to know when it comes to placing plants. And this is why I say that the plants know exactly what they're doing. It's people that goof this up. Some plants need to be kept dry. You water them just like you water the plant next door to it, thinking that they're both the same. Well, the one dies, but the one who likes water thrives. There's a reason why you did that. You thought they were the same, but the plants know better, or not, So how you place the plant, how you water the plant, the type of fertilizer. There's a lot of plants like coffee, tea, camellias, gardenias, for instance, all rhododendron, all popular common plants that we use. They're acid lovers. Those plants like to have an acidic culture in the soil. Now, pH of soil, or alkalinity, acidity, is not something that you can see by just looking. It's one of the more esoteric qualities in the garden. Now, in general, the eastern U.S. or areas where it rains quite a bit tend to have more acidic soils, and the western U.S., where it doesn't rain so much, tends to have more basic soils. That's a general rule, but it doesn't necessarily hold. So you really need to know what is the pH of the soil in your yard. So there you go. Observation and then analysis. And then when you take the information you got, you need to put it to work. And so if you find that your soil is a 5.5 pH, well, you know then that blueberries will thrive for you. You'll grow a great crop of potatoes in that. Your azaleas are going to look magnificent without any adjustment to the pH. Rhododendrons, camellias, all of this stuff, it's all going to do really well in that kind of acidic soil. On the other hand, if you got soil that's pH 7, blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, camellias, coffee, gardenias, they're all going to look yellow. They're going to get chlorotic. They develop what we call chlorosis, which is really not a disease. It's a cultural deficiency. pH is wrong. They can't eat. Nutrients become bound up during various different scales of pH. Certain things get locked up. Now, here in Hawaii, fairly acid soils and high humidity in the soil, we lock up phosphorus real bad. We flush nitrogen away, but phosphorus can be there and it gets bound, And so adjusting the pH to raise it a little bit so it unlocks the phosphorus, and then addressing additional frequent feedings with phosphorus, blah, blah. Everywhere you live, these situations are a little different. This is why it can be very important to cultivate a local nursery person. Now, not all nursery people are as bright as others, that's for sure. But hopefully, most of the time, if you're in a quality local nursery, hopefully, small business, family owned, you usually find a little bit better educated staff in places like that. The local box stores, Home Depots, Lowe's, and that sort of thing, they can have some fairly bright guys. They might. No guarantee, though, either there. And it's probably information I've heard coming out of their stores is usually not the kind of quality that I hear from a little bit more specialty, smaller local nurseries. So, where do you find your information? Well, like I say, cultivating a local nurseryman can help, but you're still at their mercy as to whether they're really savvy about the question you ask them. which does bring to mind something that used to come up when I was a manager in a nursery, and I had 17 people there in the store as staff, and maybe 100 customers on a given day there. And well, what would happen oftentimes is I would get some guy who decided that the only way to get a good answer out of here is he's going to walk around and ask everybody who worked in the store the same question. Well, it was not unusual that this type of individual would then later come to me with complaints, because everybody they asked generally tended to give them an answer that was somewhat different, sometimes very different, depending. You know, everybody's got their own opinions on things, and in fact, a lot of them can all be right. You know, if you were thinking you wanted to grow the tomato organically, but you went to a guy that doesn't do organic stuff, he's going to sell you a sack of mineral salt-based fertilizer. He may not even recommend compost, for instance, although they should. On the other hand, if you went to somebody who does organic stuff, they're going to give you a different set of parameters. And they're both going to be right. It's all point of view. So, you know, how you ask a question and letting people know what are the parameters of what you're dealing with. So this again is, you know, in observation, research, and analysis. I go to the universities all the time. I get people asking me questions that I don't know the answers to. Bill's got a lot of stuff in here over the years. I've stored a massive amount of information in my brain. At least that's what people tell me. To me, it's just a normal amount of information, you know. That's because that's me. I'm normal. That's the way I see myself. But I will oftentimes, you know, get a question that I'm unsure of. Because, especially here being on the web with the Green Garden Guy thing, well, I have people in Florida ask me a question. Well, I've been in Florida many times, mostly fishing. Never planted a garden in Florida. I know their crops, blah, blah, and some of their problems, too. But I don't know everything about Florida. I get questions that come to me from New Zealand. I've had Australian questions. I get questions from Maine. I get questions about things from places where their insects are different, their funguses are different, their weather's different, and so on. And so I will oftentimes then, if it came from Australia, I'll go to the University of Australia, Sydney, and I'll ask the university the question. Most of the really good agricultural universities do have excellent websites where you can find out almost anything about gardens, plants, and crops. That is where I get most of the information that I do not personally possess from experience. And I get good information that way too, and some of my suggestions, for instance, people living in the western United States, well, there's nothing like UC Davis. UC Davis is outstanding, and they also have UC Davis Master Gardener program, which is going to be more organic or IPM type of things, you know. Or there's the regular stuff, which again, Davis is kind of both. They do, you know, chemical agriculture. They also do IPM or integrated pest management and so on. And so you can get multiple different points of view out of the same website on the same subject with them. I usually would just type UC Davis / and then peach fungus, or, you know, oranges, or whatever. The more specific you can get it to the issue, the more easy it'll come up, because they've got so much. Here in Hawaii, I use UH Manoa. Great ag university, excellent information. The Hawaiian Agricultural University system is one of the better ones in the country. It's good. It's really good. But it's, you know, basically tropical agriculture, and stuff may not do you any good at all, depending where you live. You know, as I get out east, people ask me questions about apples and so forth. You know, University of Ohio, University of Pennsylvania, Michigan, New York. These are great. You know, they're really, really good. And you find stuff down south too, in Georgia and so on. You peck around, and especially in the area where you live, learn to use the university systems. They will give you good information. You might not agree with the method they offer. Oftentimes it will be based on agricultural chemicals. But you'll be able to find out, you know, what is the disease and how do you treat it, and If you don't like the fungicide they offer you, well, then you can go ahead and you can find an organic one that might work for the same thing. So 80-20 observation analysis. Where do you get your information? This is really important, and the fact that you pursue looking for the information. And so we look at things, we try to figure out what we're looking at. And when we can't figure that out, you can, for instance, I have seen leaf spots and marks on plant leaves that, oh man, I have no idea what caused that. You know, I consulted on citrus up here in Honokaa, up on the waterfall coast, where the citrus trees had bright orange material all over them. The owner was being told it was rust. Well, the citrus don't get rust, and so I knew immediately that the previous information was incorrect, but I did not know what I was looking at. And I ended up, University of Florida, real good, pictures of citrus leaves with diseases. I typed into their website, citrus diseases, images, or you do a Google, citrus leaf images, you know, diseases and so on. That also helps. You can go through that stuff and then you go, oh man, that looks a lot like it, you know, and so you hit the image and it comes up with some website that's talking about it and so on. And you may or may not be right. In the case of the orange on the leaves, I couldn't find anything. I mean, I went as far away as Australia. I kept searching and searching. I wouldn't give up. And finally, it dawned on me. She had a very unusual climate where they're at. I mean, they're high up the mountain, a lot of mist, a lot of fog, so on. Here on koa trees in particular, we have a certain type of a lichen. Now, lichen is not a hostile thing. It's a combination of a fungus and a plant that live together in a symbiotic relationship. They oftentimes eat rock, they eat tree bark, things like this. They're not a harmful thing. But what had happened is under her conditions, they hadn't been feeding the citrus trees. The citrus tree growth had slowed down to almost nothing. The kind of weather conditions they had with like mountain fogs was promoting the growth of this koa tree lichen across her citrus trees, and because they weren't feeding him, the trees were growing too slow to keep up with the rate of growth of the lichen, and the lichen literally covered everything, and once that happened, then it was obscuring the sunlight to the plant, and the plant was slowing down even further, and so they had lack of photosynthesis, lack of fertilizer, and a very happy lichen that was coating the entire tree. That took me a while. And so the observation was fairly simple. Duh, they're orange. The analysis was long. And then again, there is no website anywhere and probably nobody who you're going to come to who is going to say, oh, well, that's a simple one. I know exactly what to do. I had to create a solution for it. You know, we sprayed the trees with a zinc sulfate. That kind of sets the lichens back. Copper may also work, I'm not sure, but generally speaking, the metal salts will usually work on things like lichens and mosses and so on. That kind of set it back, but then the main thing was get the things fed. And so we started feeding the trees. Well, the next visit, trees looked pretty good. They were coming back from it, so I apparently hit the nail on the head. But it's not always that easy. And sometimes when you don't know what to do, best thing to do is nothing. That applies to your life, that applies to anything else, your relationships, it doesn't matter. Humans are doers. We're doers. We look at the world and we want to take our hands, which are great tools, you know, these are beautiful, what do they call it, opposing thumbs, right? We want to grasp the world and we want to make it do something. You get a problem in the nation and what happens? People jump up and they look at Congress and they do something, you know. Pass some stupid law that doesn't usually work well. But we're doers, and sometimes we need to avoid doing because it's a first knee-jerk type of reaction. When we don't understand what we're doing, you're really better off doing nothing because oftentimes the solution that you think of is going to actually harm the situation and make it worse. So know what you're doing, and if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. Sit back, maybe eventually it'll come to you. Maybe somebody will drop by who knows it. Maybe he'll send me an email with a good picture and I'll look at it and go, oh, that's easy. Yeah, I might. Some of these things are, for me, just second nature. I've seen them so many times. You know, other things like orange trees are rather mysterious. So, green thumb gardener, brown thumb gardener, 80% observation and analysis, and only 20% action with the green thumbs. Those guys with the stinky brown thumbs, they kill everything they get near. 20% observation and analysis. Maybe don't even read the darn label, and then they spring to action and do something. That's usually wrong. Sometimes worse than wrong. It's deadly. So that's it, folks. Got any questions on it? Of course, you know, you can pass them along here, and I'll field it. That's about all I can think of saying on that subject, and it might be an important one for you, I hope. Aloha. Y'all have a nice day. Thanks for watching.